love engaging people. I love challenging people's sort of conceptions around things, but in particular, I love talking about periods because the fascination around it is a natural bodily function has so many implications around it, so many taboos, so many negative stereotypes, and that shouldn't be the case, right? And so my core sort of aim is to ensure that young girls in South Africa, when the first time they start menstruating, they can be like, sure, this is happening. Let's have period parties, or sure, this is happening, let me tell my friends, or sure, this is happening, let me tell whoever, but not feel afraid to. Because from the conversations I've been having, a lot of young girls will start menstruating at 11 and only tell their parents when they're 15. There's this misconception that the earlier you start, it means that you're playing around with boys. But there's no literature, data, or science to show that. I think my own journey with my own period is when I started when I was 10 years old, and I felt very terrified. In that moment where I came across this blood, I was like, oh my gosh, what's happening? I hid in my room, literally waited 3-4 hours for my mom to come back home. And I remember when I told her, like, Mom, I'm bleeding. She could tell, hey, okay, this is happening. But she sat me in a way like I broke the furniture, I burnt the Tupperware, like I did something wrong over something that I had no control over. It just stuck with me. I carried that shame and stigma, and I know it wasn't my mom's intention to do so, but I think what I recognized as being an activist is that it's a generational thing. So she probably had the same conversation with her mom. For me, it was like, I need to end that cycle within my own space, but also ensure that we're also having families in that cycle as well. Because I think everyone is an activist in their own way. Even if you aren't always on the streets protesting for something, you could be trying to change the way things are in the work environment that you're in, or you're trying to change the way things are in the community that you live in. We're all activists because we all want better for ourselves and the communities that we find ourselves in, right? So I think what's important is, let's remove this fear. You would rather have a well-informed, educated, and empowered child who knows what to do in these situations than rather just acting out of fear alone. Because with menstruators as well, when you don't educate a young menstruating child, they will most likely, insert a tampon in the wrong place, or they most likely will wear a pad longer than they're meant to, or they'll most likely use unhygienic materials because they don't have access to these things. So this is great, putting them at greater health implications, right? And so with boys, I think boys also find themselves in situations where if they see a menstruator and their uniform is stained, they don't know what to do but other than laugh because they're coming from a place of the unknown. Because part of ending the stigma also means that men need to be brought into this conversation and understanding to remove this element of, oh, when she's menstruating, she's out of control or she's irrational, or no. Men in their lives have a social responsibility in just having these conversations with the menstruators in their lives. Part of the norms around menstruation is that I think a lot of people associate being feminine as weak. They'll use the menstruation or the menstrual cycle to justify why we are weak. We go through this process for 7 days, we're bleeding, we are moody, we are everything, and that tells us that we're weak. I think there's also this internalized violence that is also played out amongst menstruator to menstruator, in particular between mother and child. What we see play out, especially in the South African setting, is that mothers will beat their children for staining the sheets. So that is also part of violence there, right? What we also see play out, and especially in terms of, because menstruation is a holistic issue, right? So beyond the biology, we're also looking at the access to water because these are things that we need. But in certain communities in South Africa, if I have to take a bucket and walk more than 10 kilometers in the dark to get water, the specific violence that I could encounter is also another reality, right? In particular, we also have this thing called menstrual huts. So what happens is that when a young girl is menstruating, she will be isolated in a hut away from her society, from a community. And sometimes perpetrators take that as an opportunity to go and, sexually violate these menstruators because they're far away. It's these norms that have to be eradicated, and just in essentially seeing it as this person, this menstruator, is moving from childhood to adulthood. And because of that, this is what should happen in terms of access to period products, access to education, access to health services, and there shouldn't be any violence associated to that. For me, what's important about being an activist is leaving a legacy that is beneficial for the next set of menstruators.